You are born into the warrior caste, and that is not a blessing. It is a sentence. There is no real childhood here, only the early start of discipline. Pain is your teacher, and tears are a public insult to your clan. At 15, the ceremony does not make you noble, it makes you useful. Even the haircut exists for war, so the helmet will not slip when killing starts. Your armor is beautiful, expensive, and heavy enough to remind you that elegance is just decorated burden. The higher your rank, the more absurd the helmet becomes, because fear also has fashion. The demon mask does not erase your fear, it only helps weaponize it. By now you understand the rule. Your body is no longer fully yours. It belongs to service. You are not being raised to live freely. You are being prepared to die correctly. You think the katana is your main weapon because later centuries will build an entire myth around that lie. In reality, your true weapon is the bow. Because a samurai is first a mounted archer, the smartest kill is the one you make before the enemy ever reaches you. If arrows fail, the spear takes over, and physics beats romance every single time. Even your horse is less glorious than the myth, but much better at surviving mud and distance. You are paid in rice because in your world, food and money are basically the same argument. You are allowed to kill a peasant for insolence, which says far more about the system than about honor. Heads are not just proof of courage, they are receipts. Beneath every noble warrior stands a wall of expendable peasants doing the actual dying. Your lord's castle is not a palace, it is organized paranoia made of wood and angles. Even marriage is strategy here, and even the household is armed. When war begins, you march with spare sandals and tools for prisoners, not poetry. The horse is saved for battle, which means you carry most of the misery yourself. The war camp is not heroic, it smells of mud, smoke, filth, and men who stopped pretending cleanliness matters. You perfume the helmet so that even a severed head can die with some dignity. When battle starts, distance matters first, and courage only becomes relevant after the arrows fail. Real killing is clumsy, close, and ugly, far more grabbing and stabbing than elegant cinema. If you want payment, you bring back a head, because war here runs on proof and bookkeeping. Before the myths, this is your life: exhaustion, hierarchy, and records. After combat comes the most insulting part, proving that the head you dragged back is worth enough to matter. Kill the wrong man and your courage becomes unpaid labor. In your world, honor still answers to administration. When darkness falls, the battlefield belongs to survivors, scavengers, and anyone practical enough to finish the dying. Glory disappears quickly when nobody is left to carry you home. And then the same world that rewards severed heads asks you to hold a tea bowl like your fingers were made for grace. Court intrigue kills more slowly than a spear, but it can bury an entire house just as well. You learn that in this life, calm and brutality are not opposites, they are roommates. Even after the killing stops, the system keeps demanding neat paperwork. That is your era in one image: elegance on the surface and a butcher's ledger underneath. Then your clan dies, and with it goes the one thing that gave your life legal meaning. Now you are a Ronin, which sounds romantic until hunger starts making decisions for you. You do whatever keeps rice in your bowl because pride does not boil well. The famous ninja are not men in black pajamas. They are whoever the wall fails to notice. One spy with a torch can do more damage than 10 brave idiots with swords. In your world, even a latrine can become an intelligence office. To keep from going mad, you turn to Zen and try to call emptiness wisdom. You learn to turn fear into poems because language is cheaper than peace. But silence does not erase what you have done. It only teaches you how to carry it quietly. For the first time, your life belongs to you. And that turns out to be a different kind of prison. Then strangers arrive from the sea carrying trade, God, and a better way to kill. The gun looks clumsy, slow, and almost insulting to everything you were taught to admire. At first you laugh because any farmer can learn this machine in days. Then you realize that lead does not care about discipline, lineage, or years of training. Nobunaga understands what many proud men refuse to admit: war has changed faster than honor. At Nagashino, genius looks less like bravery and more like a fence in the right place. 3 lines of gunners turn the battlefield into industry and courage into target practice. Great horsemen die in the mud before they can get within 50 meters of glory. In one small hole, an entire age of sword myths begins to rot. From now on, the best warrior is no longer the finest swordsman, but the man with more powder. One master dies by betrayal, and another rises from peasant mud to rule the whole country. Hideyoshi disarms the countryside and turns social order into a cage with cleaner lines. Japan grows richer, stranger, and more dangerous all at once. Then comes Korea, and suddenly your land war becomes a floating disaster. At sea, your confidence meets an admiral who understands the water better than you understand your own pride. Shipping heads is expensive, so empire solves the problem by cutting faces into inventory. You do not steal gold, you steal craftsmen, because beauty can be more valuable than a corpse. In the end, all that death buys you is emptiness and a long road home. The moment the strong ruler dies, every alliance starts rotting from the inside. War no longer begins with arrows, it begins with paperwork and carefully timed betrayal. Then comes Sekigahara, where an entire country waits inside one morning of uncertainty. Everyone arrives claiming loyalty, but no one fully trusts the men standing next to them. Battle begins before anyone can see the whole shape of it, which makes fear even more efficient. Then history pauses because one man has not yet decided who he wants to betray. And when he finally moves, the battle stops being a contest and becomes a collapse. Nothing destroys courage faster than seeing the wrong crest charging at your side. Victory belongs less to the bravest swordsman than to the man who best understood timing and treachery. Sekigahara ends one age of war and begins another quieter one built on control instead of chaos. Tokugawa wins, and suddenly peace becomes another kind of weapon. The swamp becomes a capital, and the capital becomes a machine for keeping everyone in line. Your lord now spends as much energy commuting for obedience as he once spent marching to war. This system is called order, but it works because everyone important is also partially trapped. You were raised for battle, and now your greatest enemy is administrative paperwork. The sword stays on your body, but its real work increasingly becomes decorative. Peace does not make you richer, it just makes your poverty more polite. The merchants you were taught to look down on now have more money than many men allowed to kill them. You keep training because identity is easier to preserve than purpose. You are still called a warrior, but now the state prefers you neat, loyal, and very busy with anything except actual fighting. Then the country closes itself like a fist, and peace becomes isolation with good paperwork. The same class that once lived for battle now spends its evenings in theater, brothels, and beautifully organized denial. Even fire becomes one of the few enemies left worthy of a sword-bearing class. Then men who barely fought begin defining what true warrior spirit was supposed to mean. Bushido becomes cleaner in writing than it ever was in life. The story of the 47 Ronin turns obedience, revenge, and death into a national morality play. Even suicide becomes formal, aesthetic, and useful to the state. Beneath the myth, many samurai are simply going broke in slow motion. Then the black ships arrive, and centuries of carefully arranged certainty begin to crack in a single afternoon. What stands offshore is not just foreign power, it is physics demanding obedience. Your code of honor does not matter much when the enemy can erase a harbor from beyond bow range. Japan opens not because it wants to, but because refusal has become too expensive. Humiliation turns into rage, and rage quickly starts looking for throats. Patriotic murder becomes a career path for men who think history can be corrected with enough bodies. The state answers with its own killers, cleaner uniforms, tighter ranks, and just as much blood. Some men realize Japan cannot survive by choosing the past harder. It has to invent something new. By now, every street feels like a fuse, and everyone is standing too close to the powder. The end of your world does not come from one direction, it comes from everywhere at once. Then the Civil War begins, and suddenly every choice you avoided becomes a battlefield. This is no longer just about skill, it is about which version of Japan will get to survive. On this field, lineage gets tested against gunpowder and loses faster than pride can reload. Once retreat begins, loyalty starts sounding suspiciously like bad timing. Some domains choose to go down with dignity, which usually means going down with everyone inside the walls. The young are still taught that dying correctly is nobler than living uncertainly, and history keeps collecting the bill. Even at the edge of the country, defeat keeps trying to reinvent itself as principle. The last heroes of the old order do not lose quietly, they lose theatrically. By the end, the argument is settled by whichever side learned the future faster. The war does not just end a government, it ends the political oxygen that kept your class alive. Then the state comes for the body itself, and your haircut becomes political. The order sounds simple, cut the top knot, but what it really cuts is continuity. Soon even the swords are banned, and the soul you carried at your waist becomes illegal in public. So the old warrior spirit makes one last doomed appointment with history. This is not a battle, it is the administrative disposal of an entire class. Courage still exists, but now courage is just another thing. Modern weapons erase efficiently. With Saigo's death, the era does not retire, it is buried. The survivors do not vanish, they are absorbed, legalized, uniformed, and assigned new jobs. Some of the smartest samurai stop swinging steel and start selling it. You are told that everyone is equal now, but what it really means is that your old rank has been turned into memory. The new Japan is built by exhausted hands that inherited none of the old glory. Now the farmer's son and the lord's son wear one uniform and die from the same bullet. The state discovers that industry kills more efficiently than lineage ever could. Then the myth is rewritten, simplified, and sold back to the world as timeless wisdom. The samurai does not disappear. He is recycled into propaganda with sharper uniforms and larger maps. What survives best is not the truth, but the version pretty enough to print on posters. The class dies, but the posture survives in offices and stories that still worship discipline. History eventually turns suffering into glass case elegance, and that may be the strangest violence of all. So, what were you really? A man of honor, a servant of power, a professional killer, or just a product of your century? In the end, the samurai survives as a story, and stories are always cleaner than reality. In peacetime, some samurai become firefighters, others drift through kabuki districts and pleasure quarters, carrying 2 swords and less purpose than their grandfathers. Musashi survives as the exception. Everyone quotes because most warriors now die of debt, boredom, or paperwork rather than battle. The famous ideals sound pure only because later generations polish them harder than the men who first lived them. Even seppuku becomes theater, less an act of raw will than a ritual staged for witnesses, records, and posterity. By the time modern Japan is built, the old code has already been stripped for parts and reused in schools, barracks, offices, and factories, which is why the samurai does not vanish so much as dissolve into the machinery of a new country, and the myth keeps marching on after you.